It's really great to be here. There's a lot of things to talk about tonight. And what I want to talk about tonight is helping different kinds of minds to work together. I'm a visual thinker. And when I was young, I used to think everybody thought in pictures like me. And it was really I got a lot of insight when I found out that that wasn't the case. You all know that when I was a little kid, I was severely autistic, no speech until age 4. I got into really good early educational intervention. I can't emphasize that enough. You got 3-year-olds that are not talking, you better start working with them right now. Now, there's a lot of conflicts out there in the world. The techies hate the suits. The people in the field can't stand the academics. People fight over, well, is observation actually real science? Artists can't stand the accountants. Now, the first step in getting over some of these conflicts is understanding that people think differently. You know, Einstein would be labeled autistic today. No speech until age 3. Steve Jobs was a weird loner, and he brought snakes to school, and he turned them loose in his elementary school classroom. And he was also a filthy, dirty hippie. He's done very well for himself. So one geeky kind of kid goes to Silicon Valley, and I've been to Google, I've been to Microsoft, I've been to NASA. Oh, spot the Asperger, spot the mild autism at NASA, that's lots of fun. And I talked to a retired space scientist that told me that half the buddies at NASA at the Houston control room are probably on the spectrum. Is observation part of real science? Yes. What's astronomy? It's observation. I used to fight my thesis advisor about this. He said, well, if you don't have a controlled experiment, you don't have science. And I go, what is astronomy? What is epidemiology? You know, you're figuring out what causes the disease. You look around in a whole lot of places and you put pieces together. When I learned that my thinking was different, that gave me a lot of insight. Let's go back to Steve Jobs. He was a visual thinker. The mathematicians had to make the inside of the phone work, but Steve Jobs made an interface that was easy, and he didn't have to have a PhD in engineering to figure out how to use the phone. Okay. This is one of my really important slides, the different kinds of minds. I'm a photorealistic visual thinker. Everything I think about is a picture. I'm an object visualizer. Couldn't do algebra. So how did I get through college when I couldn't do algebra? Well, thank goodness in 1967, when I went to college, the required class was finite math. It wasn't algebra. The educational fad at the time was finite math. There are a lot of kids that are good at visual thinking. They can do geometry just fine. Now, I did an interesting thing to find interesting math things online. Get Google Images up and use the image function to search for geometry. You'll find fabulous websites. Then you have the pattern thinker. They think in patterns, not in pictures, but in patterns. These kids often have trouble with reading. We get kids with different labels: ADHD, dyslexic, oppositional defiant. That used to be called juvenile delinquents or naughty. Now there's a medical term for it. Some of these kids are bored. You get a 3rd grader, you keep making him do baby math, he's going to get bored. He may need special ed in reading, but maybe he should be doing the college math book. Don't bore him. Then you have the guy that knows all the facts about history. Everything about history, he knows it. And some people learn better through their ears. Now, a lot of these kids that are different don't do very well with long strings of verbal information. They're going to do better if they have a pilot's checklist. Okay, boom, bullet points, this is what you do. Now you might wonder, do I have any evidence-based for these different kinds of minds? Yes. In my book, The Autistic Brain, I have got all the scientific journal articles to show that this really is real. Actually exists. Now my kind of thinking about it is called bottom-up. Now what does bottom-up mean? You use specific examples to form concepts. Top down, you get a really big verbal theory, a lot of education stuff, a lot of jargon. Top down, everything's the same. Bottom up, you take specific examples and you put them into categories. So when I was a little kid, how did I figure out that a dog wasn't a cat? Well, I first sorted them by size. Labradors and golden retrievers were bigger than cats. Then our next door neighbor got a dachshund. So, how did I figure out that the dachshund was not a cat? Well, she had features that dogs have, like barking, and she smelled like a dog. You see, it's sensory-based. Visual thinkers notice details. It's also associative thinking. And visual thinking can help you solve a lot of different kinds of problems. In my work with cattle, it became obvious to me to look for little details in the environment that cattle see. Get down at their level, you can see a car through the fence. You need to get all the vehicles away from the corrals. Maybe there's chains hanging down in it. And I still have to talk about chains hanging down in chutes because people are not seeing them. And I'm going to show you later on that the mathematicians and the engineers, they need visual thinkers like us to prevent serious problems. Animals notice sensory detail in the environment. Now right there, they've got a very nice non-slip floor for the animal. Now let's just see how good you are at visual thinking. How many people here noticed that that animal was locked onto that sunbeam like radar? Raise your hand. Well, not doing very well in observation. Kids do a whole lot better. Kids do well on this. And when I showed this slide to the mathematicians at Fermi Lab in Batavia, Illinois, almost nobody saw it. See, the mathematician doesn't see visual things. Look at how the horse and the zebra have an ear on each other, and then the other ear's pointed at me. Watch where animals are pointing their ears. An animal's world is sensory-based. It's not word-based. What is it seeing, smelling, hearing? It's a world of sensory detail. I always get asked by the public, do the cattle know they're going to get slaughtered? No. This is a question that I've got to answer. So I'd go to the slaughter plant and watch the cattle go up the chute, and then I'd go out to the feed yard and I'd watch the cattle go in the vaccinating chute. They behave the same way in both places. Now they don't like the dark, and one good thing in that facility is they've got white translucent panels in that tunnel. So they're not going into a black hole. Lighting has a very big effect. You can use lights at night to attract cattle in, but during the daytime it doesn't work very well. You can also say, hopefully this pointer will work, right here you got a backstop gate, and you want to make sure you tie those open. Don't make the cattle go clumping through that. Maybe hook it up with a remote control room. Now how many people here, looking at this picture, notice that you had people standing in the wrong place? Hope you noticed that. It shouldn't be there. Animal being a visual thinker, a man on a horse is a different picture than a man on the ground. And there's some places that do all the cattle handling on a horse, and then when the cattle go to a feed yard, an auction, or a packing plant, and they see that first man on foot, they freak out. Because a man on foot is a different picture than a man on a horse. They need to get trained to both. And I talked to one rancher today who uses a four-wheeler, and his cattle recognize the tone of voice of the four-wheeler, like how it's revving up and what that means. They're understanding that. Now, being a visual thinker has helped me on designing handling facilities because I can test run it in my mind. And this is laid out so that cattle come right on around the band, half-circle tub. Tell you a little secret. Try working it from center pivot. Stand right there. They'll come right on around you. It works great. In fact, this is a little design that I've come up with for simpler cattle handling facility. I've got it up on my website. People are wanting things that aren't quite so expensive. But animals have a natural tendency to go back to where they come from. So I want to lay it out, so I use that. Now, how does being an associative thinker work? It's not linear. Give me a key word like shoes. I see the dreadful little shoes I had to wear when I went to church when I was a kid. And my 50s upbringing helped me. I had Miss Manners meals. I was taught turn taking. Well, these little autistic and dyslexic kids, they got to be taught turn taking. They got to be taught being on time. And maybe the child might have a sound sensitive issue with loud music at church. Well, then maybe you let them go out in the foyer. But not going is not an option. You let them go out in the foyer, deal with the noise. And when we went on this dreadful ferry boat, I was allowed to go in the downstairs cabin to get away from the scary horn that hurt my ears. Now I think about shoes with more pleasant childhood memories, and it makes me so happy that these shoes are back in style now. Childhood shoes, I think about places I went wearing those kind of sneakers. That's what I wear today. As I gave a talk in a really nice hospital, I'm thinking about when I stepped in their parking lot. Somebody didn't clean up after the dog. And I'm not going to show you a picture of that. Or mud puddles. Another speaking engagement, I stepped in a big mud puddle. So that's making me think about this real muddy piece of ground. And Brad started to walk across it. He's been working with the bookstore. By the way, we are signing books tonight. And I said, Brad, I don't think you need to go out in that mud. Because I immediately started thinking about where I went across a muddy place like that at the Denver airport, fell in it right before a trip. Completely fell in it. Fortunately, I had to change of clothes. I went to the bathroom and I had to wear the same clothes for the whole trip. That wasn't so hot. But you see how it's associative. There's a logic to it. And there is evidence, scientific evidence, that there are different kinds of thinking. Some people are more visual, like a photograph. Others are more thinking in patterns. Think organic chemistry. Think origami. Think geodesic domes. Pattern thinkers. So how did I get started in my career? I was a really weird geek. The way that I got started was to show people my work. I sold my work by showing off my portfolio. Well, today we were talking about what are we going to do about this kid who's really good at welding. And I'm so glad that you're bringing back all the vocational classes. Because I've worked with so many millwrights and people working on installing equipment in big meatpacking plants that I know were on the autism spectrum. And they were some of the best millwrights that they had.